Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Chelsea B. Davis with Veggies Do It Better. And on behalf of Compassionate PDX, Animal Rights Collective Portland, my fellow event organizers, and today's speakers, I want to welcome you to virtual Fur Free Friday. Fur Free Friday has been an annual event in downtown Portland for decades now, and even longer in cities around the world. And this year is obviously different because of COVID, but the silver lining in us moving this event online is now we're able to reach an even wider audience and together make an even bigger impact for animals. That said, we're very thankful that you're here, but more importantly, the billion-plus animals that are violently brought into this world, tortured and murdered for their skins, feathers, and fur are thankful that you're here. All of us watching today were privileged to have been born human, and I believe it is our obligation as such to be a voice for the non-human animals we share this world with. Today, we have an amazing lineup of speakers to help us gain skills and confidence in being that strong voice for animals, silenced in the fur industry and beyond. And in this time of COVID, it's more urgent than ever. COVID, for those who don't know, is what's called a zoonotic disease, which is basically when germs are spread between animals and people. So E. coli, salmonella, and even the common flu are zoonotic diseases, and like COVID, are a direct result of humans' continued disrespect and abuse towards animals. What's more, zoonotic diseases can mutate as they're passed back and forth between animals and humans, making them a huge public health issue. This is why there's a new flu vaccine every year, and it's also why those exposed to animal agriculture, and specifically mink, are one of the most vulnerable populations when it comes to COVID. In fact, since August, the USDA has confirmed cases of COVID-19 at mink operations in Utah and Wisconsin. And Oregon, which many don't realize is the fourth largest pelt producing state behind Wisconsin, Utah, and Idaho, has 12 permitted mink farms with an estimated 438,000 animals. This is a public health issue. It's time to shut down fur farms and animal agriculture as a whole. COVID will not be the last pandemic that we face if we don't stop using and abusing animals. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to today's rally. But before I turn it over to our first speaker, I want to take a minute and ask a quick favor of everybody. For those that are watching this live on Facebook, can you do us a quick favor, and you're just going to click that share button. We really want to get this information out to as many people as possible, so you can share it to your private page, or if you're in a vegan group or an activism group or another group where this content might be beneficial, please do go ahead and share that there. And then if you're on Instagram, if you can just take some photos and some video and be sure to tag us, we would love to hear your thoughts. And we also want to share your content as well as you're viewing this presentation. So you can add our handles to that, which are Compassionate PDX, Veggies Do It Better, and arc.pdx, that's arc.pdx. Also, I wanted to mention that we're doing a raffle. So for anybody who likes or comments on the live stream and the Facebook feed, the Facebook event, you will be entered to win a fur-free PDX shirt of your choice, an herbivore pin like so, and also this cookbook by the China Study of quick and easy vegan recipes. So we really want to hear your thoughts and your questions. I'll be watching the feed and relaying any questions you have to our speakers today. And if you're watching through Zoom, you can definitely utilize the chat feature to ask your questions, and I'll relay them for you. So, all right, is everybody ready to get started with Virtual Fur Free Friday? Our first speaker today is Matthew Cooper. He's an organizer for Compassionate PDX. He's also one of my fellow event organizers. He is on the advisory committee for Animal Rights Collective Portland, and he's a part of the brand new Fur Free Oregon campaign. He has been working with his group of colleagues tirelessly to advance legislation for the protection of non-human animals, and their mission is to create a more compassionate world. So Matthew, will you please share with us what is happening with the current campaign and tell people how they can help?
Thanks, Chelsea. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming today. My name is Matthew. I'm an organizer for Compassionate PDX, along with Amber, Danny, Diana, and Priya, who are also on the call. It's unfortunate that we've had to cancel the in-person events this year, but I'm so grateful we're able to share the space with you. I'll give a brief overview of how we got here, and then talk about our current efforts with the Fur Free Oregon campaign. Compassionate PDX got started in early 2018, working to ban the sale of new fur products in Portland. We were inspired by the success of cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles. We got to work building our coalition, collecting signatures, and outreaching city commissioners. We've received a phenomenal amount of support from the Humane Society of the United States, In Defense of Animals, Animal Defenders International, and many others here in the local animal rights community. In total, we collected 4,800 handwritten signatures from Portland residents, and 50 local businesses endorsed the ban. But with the city in lockdown and the pandemic and social unrest, we've shifted our focus to the state. And so we began the Fur Free Oregon campaign earlier in this fall. The legislation that we're putting forth is a ban on new fur products based on the one that passed in California last year. There's an exemption for spiritual and cultural use by Native Americans. It doesn't cover used fur, so thrift stores won't be affected. Oregon doesn't have a sales tax, so there won't be any lost revenue. Of the stores that we found that do sell fur, it's only a small part of their overall revenue. And those stores will be given a phase-out period of at least a year. And once again, we've received an immense amount of support from our coalition members, particularly HSUS. And the state representatives we've spoken to have been really supportive, and 3 have agreed to sponsor the bill when it's introduced in January. It's an exciting time to be working on this with the recent sales ban in Wellesley, Massachusetts, the closure of the world's largest fur auction house, and the fur farm ban in Hungary. It's also a somber time with millions of mink being gassed to death and dumped in trenches, and thousands dying from the pandemic in the US. But there's hope that people are waking up to this industry's cruelty, violence, environmental destruction, and threat to public health. Together, we can make these cruel and unnecessary products off the shelf and move toward a more compassionate world. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Matthew. And then you can go ahead and turn off your camera. And then just a reminder for everybody who is watching to please keep your cameras off and yourselves muted, because then that way when it goes to the live stream in the event page, then it's just the speaker there. So next we want to welcome Scott Becksteed, who is the Director of Campaigns for the Animal Wellness Action and Center for a Humane Economy. Born and raised in Idaho, Scott spent a great deal of his childhood and youth on his grandfather's mink farm and grew up next door to the largest commercial fur operation in all of Idaho. After receiving his bachelor's degree from Utah State University and his JD from the University of Utah, Scott worked as an attorney in private practice in Central Oregon before going to work full-time in the animal protection sector. During that time, he also served as mayor of Waldport, Oregon from 2002 to 2007. He became known for his special expertise in the field of animal law and has taught that subject at the University of Oregon and Willamette University Law Schools. In 2000, he co-authored Animal Law, the first case book on the subject, and continues to teach animal law, wildlife law and policy, and on the Endangered Species Act as an adjunct professor of law at so many times at Willamette University. He now serves as Director of Campaigns for Animal Wellness Action and the Center for a Humane Economy. Please help me welcome Scott Becksteed.
Thank you very much, Chelsea. It's an honor to be here. Hello, everyone. It's nice to join with like-minded advocates, and I know that, like me, all of you feel very passionately about this issue. Chelsea gave my introduction, but just a little bit more. I worked for the Humane Society of the United States for 12.5 years up until just a few weeks ago, and then transitioned into my current role as Director of Campaigns for Animal Wellness Action and the Center for a Humane Economy. I was born and raised in a very rural setting. I was born and raised in Twin Falls, Idaho. And I was raised on a farm. I was raised with livestock, and I had what I think most people would consider to be a very rural and conservative and agricultural centered upbringing, for which I'm very, very grateful. I also spent a significant amount of my youth and childhood on fur farms. My grandfather raised mink, and I was our nearest neighbor, where I grew up in Twin Falls, was the largest fur farm in Idaho at that time. So I'm familiar with the conditions on the fur farms, on the mink farms in particular, and I have been writing recently about my experiences and about how what I observed growing up fits into the current situation with mink farms and with the outbreak of COVID on mink farms. I've had some, some have questioned me speaking out about my upbringing and the idea that I might be attacking my own family for how they made their livelihood. And I I'll start by just talking about that. I am not one to demonize people. I try not to judge people. I try to judge their actions, and my grandfather was a very, very kind and generous and very wonderful man, but he was caught up in an enterprise that other people in that area of the world were involved in, and while I believe that my grandfather did everything he could to make sure his mink were well cared for, there's no doubt that that mink farms are factory farms. And I have spent my entire adult life speaking out about factory farming. In fact, my last role with the Humane Society of the United States was as the director of rural outreach, where my top priority was fighting factory farms. And so the question is, why would I speak out about the evil of factory farms and speak out about every other type of factory farms, whether it's pigs, chickens, dairy cows, or whatever, but leave out the one form of factory farming with which I'm most familiar, and that being mink farming. And again, there is no question that mink farming is factory farming. It involves huge numbers of animals, intensively confined in small, tiny cages, deprived of their most basic needs. It involves huge volumes of waste and pollution and wastewater. But I think that what makes mink farming especially and perhaps uniquely cruel is that it involves a species that is still very much a wild animal. The mink is a member of the weasel family. They are semi-aquatic. They spend much of their lives in water, swimming. One of their main sources of food are fish and frogs and other prey animals that can be found in the water. And so you take a wild animal like that and you put it in a barren wire cage, roughly twice the size of a shoebox, and they develop these neurotic behaviors, which I observed throughout my childhood. They are constantly bobbing and weaving and pacing in their cages, and they exhibit extreme aggression towards people. And they engage in even more terrible behaviors like self-mutilation, cannibalism, and infanticide. And that's just a function of taking a wild animal and confining it, in a cage that is so small that it, can barely move around. So that's what I think makes mink farming especially cruel, and all forms of industrial animal agriculture are terrible, but in my opinion that sort of raises the interest in this particular form of factory farming. So when we look at the fact that these are factory farms, the issue of mink farms and the risk that they pose to human health illustrates, in my mind, perfectly the intersection of factory farming and wildlife, because you're basically factory farming a wildlife species. We know that the COVID virus, like many of the other pandemics, originated with wildlife and animals that are factory farms. COVID-19 started most likely with bats that then spread it to pangolins. And of course, these You know, the species that are kept in the wet markets and slaughtered in these open wildlife markets, especially in China, are a rampant breeding ground for all sorts of diseases. So you've got COVID-19 that started in bats and probably pangolins. The Ebola virus started in monkeys. AIDS started in chimpanzees. SARS started in bats, H1N1 started in factory farm pigs, swine flu started in factory farm pigs, the avian flu started with factory farm chickens, and MRSA, which is the Middle Eastern respiratory disease, started in camels. So again, you know, we know that if you intensively confine large numbers of animals, and especially if those are wildlife species, you are creating an environment that is perfect for spreading disease and zoonotic diseases, which pose a threat to human health. Now, we also know that mink are especially susceptible to the coronavirus. And when you take a species like the mink with a special susceptibility and cram thousands of them into tight confinement, it creates the perfect environment for an aggressive pathogen to spread. With mink, they are very often dead within 24 hours of showing the first symptoms. So unlike with humans, where you know, most human patients get a relatively mild version, with mink it is almost always lethal and very quickly lethal. And we are seeing COVID outbreaks on mink farms around the world. Right now, there have been COVID outbreaks in the Netherlands, Spain, Poland, France, Italy, Sweden, and Denmark. All of those countries have mink farm industries that have been hit by the COVID virus. And in all of those countries, they have moved very quickly to contain the spread by killing massive numbers of animals. Denmark, of course, is probably the most notable example of all the countries in Europe. Denmark is the world's top producer of mink for mink pelts. They have over 1,100 mink farms. And when the mink farms in Denmark started suffering from the COVID, the scientists made an alarming discovery, and that is that the virus appeared to be using the mink as a host to change and transform into a form that could be transmissible back to people. And so up until that point, it was believed that the virus was transmissible only unidirectionally, meaning that people could give the virus to mink, but mink couldn't give the virus back to people. Well, what the scientists in Denmark found was that the virus was actually mutating in the mink into a form that could then be transmitted back to humans. And what's even more troubling is that it was transmitted back to people in a form that could render the development of vaccines and antibodies ineffective in fighting the virus in people. So that finding by Danish scientists led to the government's decision to basically kill all 17 million mink in Denmark on over 1,100 farms as a very drastic means of stopping the spread. And other countries imposed travel restrictions from Denmark. It was a major deal. It caused a tremendous amount of concern. The World Health Organization amplified its concern over the possibility, not just of the transmission from mink to people, but also on the effect that it might have on the development of a human vaccine. So we are seeing in all of these in all of these countries efforts to basically shut down their mink farm industries. And then, of course, we see that the virus has struck mink farms in the United States. There have been outbreaks of the virus on mink farms in Wisconsin, Utah, and Michigan, leading to tens of thousands of mink either dying from the virus or being killed as a measure to stop the spread. Now, Animal Wellness Action, the organization I work for, was among the first organizations to make a concerted call for a shuttering of mink farms in the US. The actions that we have taken have included issuing a letter to the USDA, urging the USDA to create a program for buying out the last remaining fur farms in the United States. There are roughly 200 mink farms still in the United States. We also sent a letter to the CDC urging the director to take aggressive action in bringing the mink farm industry to an end as a means of fighting the spread of the disease. And we issued letters to the governors of the top mink producing states, Wisconsin, Utah, Michigan, Minnesota, Idaho, and Oregon, urging all of them to cooperate with the United States Department of Agriculture in creating a program to buy out the last remaining farms. Now, I've also been published in numerous media outlets over the past several weeks talking about this issue. We have been meeting with members of Congress to talk to them about federal action to shutter the U.S. mink farm industry. But I want to make sure that we're clear on how we are framing our call to action. We believe that it is, that any action to buy out or to end mink farms in the United States must include steps that are fair and humane to the mink producers. Again, not judging them for what they're doing, but rather encouraging them to understand the role of mink farming in a global health crisis, and offering them a package that compensates them fairly and encourages them to transition into another commodity or another product. We believe that's essential to make sure that the mink producers are being treated fairly and humanely in the process. But it's not just the COVID issue that is sort of hastening the demise of the fur industry. The fact is that the mink farming industry and fur industry more broadly has been in serious decline for many years. Pelt prices have consistently declined over the years, largely over consumer concerns over animal welfare and how animals are being treated on these fur farms. But this is a minor and declining industry in the US. There's been a sharp decline in mink production because of the widespread fashion industry rejection of mink. In 2011, US mink pelt prices averaged $94.30. Okay, so that's in 2011, just 9 years ago. And the industry was generating over $290 million in income in the United States. By 2019, just 8 years later, those values have reached a decades-long low, with average pelt prices down to just $21.90 and industry revenues at less than $60 million, just a fifth of what they were just a decade ago. More and more mink farming operations have gone out of business. At the North American Fur Auction in Canada, large volumes of pelts from various species went unsold and ended up being warehoused. In the United States, as I said, fur has sort of lost favor as a luxury item, and most of the top designers and fashion houses have repudiated the use of fur in their designs. On the consumer side, most American consumers today are likely to associate fur with animal cruelty and are unwilling to support an industry that entails so much suffering and misery for a luxury item. So now most of the pelts, mink pelts being produced in the United States on American mink farms, are producing those pelts for Chinese consumers, most of whom have yet to embrace animal welfare as a central social and moral concern. So in other words, why are we allowing an industry that involves so much animal suffering and that has emerged as a top threat for spreading COVID-19 for the sake of wealthy Chinese consumers and their taste for a luxury fashion item? Simply put, we shouldn't. So let's now look at the Oregon fur industry. Now, you heard Chelsea give her statistics on the fur industry in Oregon. Mine are a little bit different. We should probably compare notes, Chelsea, and see where we might differ. But according to my research, Oregon has 12 fur CAFOs, meaning fur factory farms, that have been issued permits by the Oregon Department of Agriculture. 8 of those 12 fur farms are in Marion County, a county that has been plagued with high rates of COVID infections since the pandemic first began. According to my research, Oregon is now ranked 5th in the nation for fur production. And, you know, we have a governor in Governor Kate Brown who has acted decisively to enact policies and guidelines to stop the spread. She has, you know, withstood intense public criticism for the steps that she has taken, but there can be no doubt that she has, you know, she has been very decisive about saying that we need to be taking certain steps and acting proactively to stop the spread of COVID-19. And we agree with her. And we have called upon her to act now to instruct her Department of Agriculture to begin acting immediately to coordinate with the USDA to begin a buyout of Oregon's mink farms. When we talk about the number of mink farms, both here in Oregon as well as in the United States, you know, roughly 200 fur farms, most of which are shrinking in terms of their production and output. The cost of doing that is a drop in the bucket compared to what our federal government has spent so far in fighting this disease. Buying out the mink farms remaining in the United States as a step to proactively stop the spread of this disease, or create an even worse problem by creating a mutated virus that jeopardizes any vaccines, it's a minor step cost-wise, and certainly one that makes sense from the standpoint of being proactive and stopping this disease. So we have called on Governor Brown to act decisively in that regard. Now, we are also in touch with state lawmakers here in Oregon. I know I just heard Matthew's excellent comments about his work with Oregon lawmakers on imposing a ban on the sale of new fur items. I have been reaching out to lawmakers with the objective of creating a state program to buy out the last remaining farms, to basically end mink farming in the state of Oregon as a COVID prevention step. And so we are in touch with state lawmakers here in Oregon on that. I'm also in touch with a lawmaker in Washington who has an interest in similar legislation in that state. So what can you do, my fellow advocates? What can you do to help? Well, first, this is number one, and this is important. Senator Jeff Merkley, our own United States Senator for Oregon, is one of the most in the new political order with you know, a Democratic president, a new administration, and a new Congress. Senator Jeff Merkley is in a uniquely powerful position and is uniquely positioned to take action on this issue. He is basically the ranking Democrat on agriculture appropriations, which means that he oversees the United States Department of Agriculture and the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. So if I had to have everyone just do one thing, I'm going to ask you to do more than one thing, don't worry, but if I had to ask you to just do one thing, it would be to call Senator Jeff Merkley and urge him to sponsor and support legislation or other federal agency action to buy out the last remaining fur farms in the United States. Senator Merkley's number is, write this down, 202-224-3753. Again, Senator Jeff Merkley, 202-224-3753. Be friendly, be nice, thank him for his service. He's been a great senator for Oregon. Urge him to use his position to take action to shut down the fur farming industry in the United States in a way that is fair and humane to the producers, but brings this dying industry to an end. So that would be my first request. Your second step, call Governor Kate Brown at 503-239-8631. Again, Governor Kate Brown, 503-239-8631. Again, be nice, be friendly, thank her for her service, and urge her to instruct her Oregon Department of Agriculture to begin a program to buy out and shut down the few remaining mink farms in Oregon as a vital step to stop the spread of COVID-19. And number 3, yes, there is one more. And I know you guys can do it because I know you're all on here for the same reason that I am, because you care enough to take action. Call your own state representative and your state senator. So this is not your Congress people or your United States senator. These are your state representatives who meet in Salem as members of the Oregon legislature. Reach out to your state representative and your state senator and urge them to support state legislation to bring an end to mink farms in Oregon as an important step to stop the spread of COVID-19. We are at a critical juncture on the issue of fur and mink farms. We have all seen the decline of the fur industry. We have seen that the campaign that so many of us have waged for so many years has borne fruit in the form of a drastically diminished appetite among the American consumers for fur. We have seen amazing progress in the retail outlets as well as fashion designers and fashion houses in no longer using fur in their designs and no longer selling fur in their retail stores. So we have made immense progress, incredible progress. We have so much to be proud of. We have so much to be grateful for. But now there's this new dimension to this issue, and that is COVID-19. And it has presented us with an opportunity to finally bring an end to industrial mink production. And we have to seize on this moment. We have to act decisively. I hope you will all reach out to like-minded advocates, encourage them to take action, pay attention to this issue. I really believe we can do this. I believe that between the fur ban that Matthew talked about and the mink farm issue, I believe that now is the chance. 2021 could be the year that we finally bring an end to this industry. But again, I want to do it. I want to see it done in a way that treats the people fairly too, that encourages them to move and transition into agriculture products that do not involve such immense animal suffering and pose a serious threat to human health. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak with all of you. Chelsea, thank you so much for inviting me and including me. And I'm more than happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Scott. So yeah, we definitely have some questions. First question is, can you repeat Jeff Merkley's phone number? Because I wrote it down incorrectly.
Yep. Hold on just a second.
Thank you.
Okay, Jeff Merkley, 202-224-3753.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, and then I'm going to scroll back because we had a couple questions. First is, do you know when the culling of mink are happening due to COVID, do you know if those animals are used or if they're just destroyed or, yeah?
No, they are destroyed, and in fact, Denmark is having a terrible situation where they have the satellite photos and the drone photos are beyond horrific. I mean, literally millions upon millions of dead animals, and most of them are being buried alive. But the problem is, with that many animals, it creates a large amount of gas, and so it's pushing the carcasses back up to the surface of the ground. And so now they are looking at having to incinerate all those animals. And of course, when you bury that many animals, many of whom are infected with disease, it raises all sorts of serious questions about, is that affecting the groundwater? What's it doing to the air? I mean, it's pretty terrible, but yes, most of them are being buried in Denmark, but I think in other parts of the country, those animals' bodies have been incinerated.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And then we have another question. Do you know of other fur farms that are in Oregon specifically, such as lynx or bobcats?
You know, I don't, and it's the Oregon Department of Agriculture doesn't list which species are on the fur farms, but just based on what I know about the fur farm industry, the two top species being produced are mink and fox, with probably chinchillas and rabbits being the next most popular. But I would say that easily the vast majority of animals being raised on fur farms in Oregon are mink.
And then do you know if fur farms are subsidized at all, either federally or statewide?
I don't believe that they are heavily subsidized like some of the other factory farm industries, especially dairy. I mean, you know, I remember last year reading that in Wisconsin, 75% of dairy farms' income is from subsidies. So you don't see that kind of subsidy in the fur farm industry, but that is certainly something that should be looked at to the extent that there are fur farms subsidies.
Did we? Oh, okay. You muted yourself now.
Yeah, I muted myself because I was done.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. And then let's see. Scott, are you aware of any efforts to address the demand in international markets, which is where the majority of local / US mink production supplies?
No, I mean, what's been interesting for me to observe is how, you know, there was a lot of demand for fur in Eastern Europe and Russia. And I think that demand there has also dropped, so that now really China remains the primary market for fur. And you know, I mean, we know that China has made such remarkable progress in other fronts. I mean, they reclassified dogs from livestock to companion animals. You know, they've shut down, you know, their wildlife markets in response to the pandemic. China's going to get there, and there are amazing people in China who think just like we do about issues like this, and they are courageously out there fighting the very same fights we're fighting. But it's a huge country. And they are fighting against, you know, some cultural elements that are very daunting, but China will get there. It's just going to take some time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. Is there any contact information or anything that you would like to share if people have further questions or want to learn more about the groups that you're working for?
Yes, absolutely. Reach me at, and it's kind of a long email address, so write it down. I am at S Beckstead. So my last name is, so it's S and then BECKSTEAD, S Beckstead, at Center for a Humane Economy.org.
All right, I think I got there. I got that. Okay, great. And then I'll be sharing all of this in the Facebook feed as well shortly. So now we are going to move on to Kelly Peterson. I'm so excited to hear from her. Her presentation is actually pre-recorded, but definitely still ask your questions and leave your comments, and then our other speakers will help fill in the gaps there. So Kelly Peterson is actually the Oregon Senior State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. After 10 years as the Senior Vice President for the HSUS, Kelly Peterson decided to come home to her first love and roots as Oregon's Senior State Director. For nearly a decade, Kelly drove and directed the state legislative strategy priorities for HSUS, working closely with state directors throughout the country to support and advance animal welfare legislation. Fight animal cruelty and engage like-minded citizens in promoting the protection of animals. Thanks in part to Kelly's efforts in Oregon, animals are now included in disaster planning and internet hunting, delivering and accepting non-ambulatory livestock at an auction market or stockyard, and acquiring exotic animals as pets are now banned. And stronger penalties for attending and participating in staged animal fighting are in place. Kelly also helped lead the fight in Oregon to regulate puppy mills, ban the confinement of breeding pigs in gestation crates, and plan and played a crucial role in passing some of the toughest anti-tethering legislation laws in the country here in Oregon, as well as legislation that requires eggs produced or sold in Oregon to come from cage-free facilities. She's a busy woman. And on top of all of that, Kelly also advocates for animals in her spare time. She is actually the co-founder of Fences for Fido, an award-winning nonprofit that reaches out to families with dogs living outdoors on chains. The group provides free fencing, spay, neuter, and new dog houses for each dog. They were founded in May of 2009, and Fences for Fido since then has built free fences for over 2,500 dogs throughout Oregon and Washington. So now I'm going to share my screen and start up her talk. So just bear with me for just a second. There we go.
Hi there. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Kelly Peterson, and I'm the Oregon Senior State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. And I'm thrilled to be talking about one of my favorite topics, because never is it more important than today that acting locally is the single most effective way to make change for animals in Oregon. And that's why it's so important that we all take responsibility for building two legislative relationships that will ultimately benefit Oregon's animals. And that's with our state representative and our state senator. Because the reason that doors open for the Humane Society of the United States and other organizations that are down at the Capitol when they're in session is because of your presence and your voice as a constituent. And it's not the other way around. Taking time in 1995, and really that was the turning. Hi there. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Kelly Peterson, and I'm the Oregon Senior State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. And I'm thrilled to be talking about one of my favorite topics, because never is it more important than today that acting locally is the single most effective way to make change for animals in Oregon. And that's why it's so important that we all take responsibility for building two legislative relationships that will ultimately benefit Oregon's animals. And that's with our state representative and our state senator. Because the reason that doors open for the Humane Society of the United States and other organizations that are down at the Capitol when they're in session is because of your presence and your voice as a constituent. And it's not the other way around. Taking time to reach out to your lawmaker about the issues that matter to you, that matters to them. It's why they ultimately ran for office. And it's what they think about when they go to vote on particular issues, the range of issues that face them at the Capitol. And it's also what they consider when they're asked to sponsor or co-sponsor a bill. So your role is so important. And I am so proud to say that as a result of our overall presence down at the Capitol and also with constituents around the state, Oregon has consistently ranked second in the country in strong animal protection laws. And that's thanks to all of you. So thank you. And in fact, you'll see the summary of animal bills that have passed since 1995. And really that was the turning point. It was when animal advocates came together in 1994 to pass a ballot measure 18, that banned bear baiting and hound hunting. And it really was the first time that animal welfare groups and animal advocates from all across the state, stopped working inside just their silos and in their particular area and came together and unified their voice. And as a result, not only were bears and cougars protected from baiting and hound hunting of bears and hound hunting for both bears and cougars, we've also built on that success. It was a foundation that was laid, and because of that, we've had such sweeping success in the legislature, and we've collectively worked to pass these laws. I will say, though, because of that, there's an overwhelming number of opponents now, and passing bills, dare I ever say it was easy. It's not quite as simple as it once was. And for background, for the legislative process here in Oregon, in 2021, the session we're going into, it will begin in mid-January through end of June. It's going to look a little different because of COVID. So most of the meetings that we have and testimony that we give will be virtual. And we're still waiting to hear what the Oregon legislature decides to do, if there will be in-person meetings as well. But in Oregon, we are each represented by a state representative and a state senator. And it's important to note that every bill introduced needs to pass through both chambers of the legislature, both in the House and the Senate. And it can get stalled or defeated anywhere in the process. And that's why of the bills that are introduced in any given session, only a tiny percentage are signed into law. Of the 3,000 bills that are introduced, 90% of them won't make it to the governor's desk. And that's why our presence is so important and why we need legislative champions to advocate from within and using their personal relationships as lawmakers with their colleagues to generate support. And it's important to keep in mind that legislative champions on animal welfare issues, whether that means sponsoring a bill on animal welfare or advocating for a bill to receive a vote, a hearing, those champions are created and developed by all of us, by their constituents. And we want them to advocate from the inside, while our role is to advocate from the outside, and for these legislative champions to use their powerful voice and influence with leadership and other lawmakers. I just want to drill down briefly into the previous slide about how a bill becomes a law. This could be repetitive for a lot of you, so I'll just try to go quickly on this. It's not important you know the process fully, but I thought I would use the coyote killing contest bill as the typical process for a bill in the legislature. Like I said, 90% of them will go through this process in order to make it to the governor's desk. There are a few exceptions, especially related to budget bills and the governor's Christmas tree bill at the end, but otherwise, this is the process for every other issue. So our coyote killing contest bill, it's a bill's introduced. It's going to be introduced in the House chamber. That's going to be the committee of origin. It will immediately be assigned to one of 12 committees. Because we have history on this bill, we know it's going to go to the House Natural Resources Committee. Thankfully, the chair of that committee is our champion. He also is the co-chair of the Legislative Sportsman Caucus. So that also works to the advantage of that bill. Once it's assigned to a committee, it will need to be scheduled for a hearing. And then it will need to be scheduled for a work session. A work session is essentially code for a vote in committee among the 7 committee members. And assuming it gets the majority, there's majority lawmakers to pass it out, it immediately moves to the House floor for floor action. And it will be voted on by all 60 state representatives throughout the state, representing their individual districts. And then once it passes, it moves straight over to the Senate chamber, and it will be assigned to a similar committee. It repeats the same sequence. It will be assigned to the Senate Natural Resources and Environment Committee. There, it's a 5-person committee. It will once again need to be scheduled for a hearing, and then it will be scheduled for a work session. Again, that's a vote for that bill. And then, assuming it passes out with majority members voting for it, it will move to the Senate floor where all 30 state senators will vote on that bill. And again, once it passes the floor, it then goes to the governor's desk. I gave you the quick and dirty. Just again, keep in mind, and I know you know this from the Coyote bill, none of these stages are guaranteed. And that's where we all come in. We have to continue to be a voice and an advocate from our legislative districts, primarily so our bill isn't forgotten about, but also so that we can continue to remind our lawmakers inside that big building that their constituents care a lot about this issue and that they're watching and they're monitoring what's happening. In the 2021 session, if there was a theme for 2021 on animal bills, it would be the theme of wildlife bills. And that's good because of all the bills that have passed in the Oregon legislature, we have really struggled on wildlife bills, in large part because there's this myth of the urban-rural divide. So, and our wildlife laws are woefully behind so many other states, including here in the West. So we know the coyote killing contest bill will be introduced. There's also will be a bill introduced that you're very familiar with, and that's the sale of new fur. HSUS is partnering with Compassionate PDX on this bill. And so currently the phase that we're in is identifying strategic sponsors, co-sponsors for the bill. And I know that the Compassionate PDX will be working really hard to keep you all informed, especially when there is a bill number. Also, as you know, there'll be a bill that will be introduced to phase out and to ban meat farms. So Scott and Animal Wellness Action will be keeping us all up to date on times that we should be taking action and what our requests should be by our individual lawmakers. And then another bill that will be introduced is a bill that would impact wet and wildlife markets in Oregon. I haven't seen the language yet, but I did want to just put a marker here so that you're all aware it's being introduced or championed by Center for Biological Diversity and WildAid. So I'll keep you apprised as we learn more. And lastly, I just want to mention the other bill that will be introduced is the bill dealing with non-lethal funding for farmers to respond to wildlife conflict. It is extrapolating an amazing program out of Benton County. So in order for farmers to get funding to help in reducing and minimizing wildlife conflict, they have to commit to using non-lethal methods, and what they can't use, they have to commit to not using any lethal control. They can't use poison, they can't use gunshot, and they can't use traps. And we're really excited about this. And again, we'll keep you up to date as that bill is introduced and as we get a bill number. And this will help in protecting and saving the lives of so many coyotes and cougars, raccoons, you name it. There's so many urban wild animals that fall victim because farmers continually use methods that not only are lethal, but don't ultimately help them. So now really is the time between now and January 14th, when session starts, to start to build that foundation and get to know our elected officials. So we want to make the most of this window. It's the time when our lawmakers are paying close attention to what matters most to their constituents. They want to hear what is meaningful for them. And we technically have in Oregon a citizen legislature. That's not the same. That's in every state. And what that means is that our legislative sessions are very short, 6 months every odd year, and only 1 month in the even years. And that means it's almost like a gunshot when session starts, and everyone's like, working towards that same deadline of trying to move their bills through the process. And so for these lawmakers, they have other jobs. That's how they have an income. They have families. And so just keep in mind that they are filled up by what they do. They're invigorated when they are able to talk to their constituents, and it's not necessarily a complaint. And they also ran for office. Just like us, they have passions and they have core values and a platform on which they ran on. And that's always very helpful to know about that as well, and to do research about who your state representative is and who your state senator is and the issues that mean a lot to them. And you know, these lawmakers are all sacrificing so much personal and family time to really make the lives better for the constituents in their district. And I do, for even the lawmakers that I disagree with, I do respect and admire that. So I always keep that in mind, even if the lawmakers can't get behind an issue that we're supporting. I will say the commonality is they are giving in a life of service. And so that's how I look at the silver lining. How to build a relationship with your state lawmaker. Look here, these are some of my tips that I have, and I want to make sure that everyone knows who their state representative is and their state senator, who represents you. You can go to the OregonLegislature.gov website to find out. You'll go to the section that says find your legislator. You'll enter in your address, your physical address, not your PO box, and that will tell you who your state representative is and who your state senator is. It'll also share with you who your U.S. congressman is or congresswoman, but that's not what we're talking about today. So you'll find out who that is. Immediately then go to the Humane Voters Oregon website, their Humane Voters Oregon PAC. They're an amazing political action committee that is the political arm of our movement in Oregon. They're working to get animal-friendly lawmakers into office. They have there a list of who they endorsed during the last election season. They also have the voting record, every single member who's been in office over the last years. So that'll be important to look up. When you identify who your lawmaker is, be sure to really dive into what their bio is on the website. Find out the platforms in which they ran upon in the last election. And also if they ran for re-election, that means that they've served on various committees. Find out what committees they've been on. That'll tell you a lot about the issues that they're very familiar with and those issues that they care a lot about. And I always like to know if they mention in their bio if they have a dog or a cat, because I always feel like, okay, there's something in common. And so take a look at, so like I said, and then take a look at the Humane Voters Oregon website. It'll be very enlightening for you, and you'll be able to get a lot more information from that page, as well as just the general OregonLegislature.gov website. And then this is when you'll start to take action. Be sure to go to their official Facebook page and like that page if you haven't already. That's important. And to begin to offer words of thanks for their work on Facebook, and make sure that you're always mentioning that you're a constituent and you're grateful for what they're doing. Sign up to receive their official e-newsletter. That's important. They usually send out e-newsletters to their constituents like bi-monthly. And that'll also give you information about how to attend their virtual town halls, which that is really where you can start to develop a foundation and a conversation directly with your state lawmakers without too much one-on-one pressure. You'll find, well, first off, I would recommend that when you do attend their virtual town hall, be on time. We're all like, there's times when I just, I'm not on time. I know it's not like great day. I got too much stacked on my agenda, but this is one of those times where you should be on time. Definitely offer a thanks for what they've been doing lately, and you can follow what they're doing on their Facebook page and offer a thank you. They don't hear that enough. They do hear a lot of complaints. And so a word of thanks is meaningful, as well as stating the issues that you care a lot about. And also, be sure that you are emailing with their office separately, your state representative and your state senator, asking for a meeting with your state senator and your state representative or their staff person. Remember, the staff person is a bridge to the lawmaker. They're the window into that lawmaker. They are so valuable. So they are often the ones that make recommendations about how their members should vote. And they are putting together backgrounders. And so they are quite influential in your lawmaker's office. And so ask for that meeting, and I'm happy to help you prepare for a meeting if you would like any tips. But something tells me that you all have, really all that you need right inside you. But again, if you need any help, I'd love to help prepare for your virtual meeting, which I'm sure would be on Zoom. And then follow up with a thank you note. And they don't hear thank you as much. They're just like us. Sometimes they hear a lot of complaints in light of, COVID and the wildfires. They've just been so, it's been really disheartening for so many of them to see the disappointments in their constituents. And so hearing a word of thanks, even if it's just for listening, is something that they'll remember. And then these are just some things to keep in mind when you are meeting with them virtually. And be yourself. You aren't expected to be a scientist or an expert. And it's just good to know the basic facts of an issue. And it's good to know why you care about it. Just say what you know, tell your story. And if the legislator asks you a question you don't know the answer to, it's okay. Just say, I don't know. I'll find out and I'll get back to you. I feel like I do that a lot. I'll get asked legal questions, and I'm not an attorney. I sometimes play one, not very well. And that's when I know I always have to, I have to go to the experts in the area. So just think of yourself as a resource for information for your state representative and your state senator, and as a bridge to accurate information, so that you establish yourself as the go-to animal person in the district. So much so that they say to their staff person, I need to know what Chelsea thinks. I need to know what Jamie thinks, or Wendy. I can't vote on this bill. I can't give a commitment on this issue until I talk to my constituent and find out what they think. And so really remember that when they come across an animal bill, how they think about you, whether it's just a little bit of contact that they've had, or if you've had some real, lengthy conversations, how they feel about you, and if it's in a positive way, is likely how they're going to feel about, and it might determine how they feel about an issue or a bill that comes their way dealing with animals. So just recognize the power that you have and your potential influence. And of course, when a legislator takes a vote on an important animal bill, again, these are important just reminders. Always say thank you. That is more meaningful than any other form of communication that you'll have with your lawmaker. And also, if they vote the wrong way, a way that will harm animals, it just isn't important. You have to politely express your disappointment. They have to know that. And let's face it, if you have a lawmaker who doesn't have a history of supporting animal bills, you have a little tougher job. And it might take longer to find an issue where you can be aligned on, but the only person who can do that is you. Even though it's frustrating, it can be really disheartening. But I'll say, if there isn't a constituent, or if there isn't you, continuing to advocate and push, we know what the end result will be. The lawmaker will continue to vote in ways that are harmful to animals. And it's kind of like, you are the best potential to change that. And it is when I remember then, especially when I'm down at the Capitol, we all have these different life experiences. And so going into a conversation, you might find that the lines in the sand are further apart on issues than you'd like. But I'm a believer in kind persistence, that does really move the lines closer together, especially on animal issues. So what I would say is just set a personal goal to work to get your legislator to support just one bill. Just support one bill, even if it's a modest one, having to do with making, making the rescue shelter pet the state pet, the state animal, something like that. It might take a long time, but through a solid and trusting relationship, that does and can happen. And what the lawmaker will find is that if they vote in a way that makes you happy, their constituent, it's going to feel good to them to get a thank you from them. And that, building on that and realizing the sky doesn't fall, is going to then allow them to be open to other issues. And it's just kind of like, a building block. So now it's my turn to profusely thank you all for your willingness to take on, a personal responsibility of developing a relationship, a professional relationship with your state representative and your state senator. Over the years, I have been always very empowered to see that lawmakers inherently know what the right thing is to do for animals once they're exposed to a situation or the issues facing animals. That doesn't mean, though, that knowing what's right actually turns into actions, because things are political in the building. And so that's what we're here to do, to turn compassion into action for our lawmakers. And I'm reminded of the quote from Franklin D. Roosevelt when he won presidency in 1932. He worked alongside so many incredible stakeholders and special interest groups that worked to get him elected in a very contentious race. He made commitments. Once he got into office, he saw that things weren't so clear cut, and there was a lot of pressure for him to do the right things. And there were a lot of other considerations. And what he privately told the people, the core people who got him elected was, I agree with you. I want to do it. Now make me do it. And that's our role. It's to gently and smartly push from the outside, to shine a light on the cruelties that face animals. And so that lawmakers feel compelled to take action to make meaningful, tangible change for animals. And my number here is 503-869-0422. You can email me, you can text me, you could call me, whatever is most convenient. I'm here to be a resource and to help you brainstorm about ways in which to reach out to your two representatives. I would love to continue the discussion. So again, thank you so much for your time. And I hope you have a great rest of the day and holiday weekend. And thanks, Living Holiday Weekend.
All right, that was amazing. I thought that was a great talk. And then we're going to talk about this at the end, but want to remind everybody that, that we're doing a virtual action hour. So I saw in the chat, there were some questions about templates and like, how do I go about reaching out and what do I say? And that's what we're going to talk about in the virtual action hour, which I'm going to discuss later. But moving right along, I want to get to our next speaker, Alex Kahn, who is a local activist who participates in public vegan outreach in various forms. He was inspired to change his life after reading Animal Liberation and Eternal Treblinka, and he strongly recommends video outreach as a means to educate the public about the cruelties of the animal industrial complex. His professional interests include biology, socio-historical evolution, and moral philosophy. Please help me welcome Alex.
Thank you, Chelsea. I'm Alex, as Chelsea introduced me. And later today, I'll be helping out a little bit with the virtual action hour, where we'll be contacting our local representatives and statewide as well in order to get them to help out with For Free Friday. And our official goal today is a fur sale ban in the state of Oregon, which is simple enough in principle, but tricky in practice due to entrenched economic systems and bureaucratic government inertia, which we've heard plenty about. Fortunately, though, underlying our immediate demand is something much more elegant and profound. All we're really asking that people do is something they did as children: imagine themselves in the position of animals. We might be too old to remember now, but it is almost guaranteed that at some point in our childhood, we were bent over on all fours, making absurd sounds and writhing around, pretending to be some other species. The same holds true for practically everyone we know: neighbors, lawyers, even online enemies from opposing political factions. Indeed, we can be confident that during their childhood, every single one of the politicians in this state pretended that they were animals. And the same holds true for our governor, senators, and even our president. Raised in the company of cats and dogs, occasionally pretending that we were one of them, it has become strikingly obvious to us that the lives of animals are rich with subjective experience. They have their own unique personality quirks. They recognize us and each other as individuals, and we would never even think of harming the ones who make their way into our lives. But in the distance, in the shadows, in nondescript mega warehouses, where the lowest economic castes of society are practically forced to work for survival, is a conflict, a dark reality that cannot coexist with the wisdom of our childhood intuitions. We've inherited a world that assumes a violent disregard for animals, a societal paradigm that reduces them to mere commodities in a supply chain. And as we left behind our childhood, we were told constantly, this is just the way it is, and this is the way it's going to be. Those of you who refuse to internalize this nonsense are here today, and I'm honored to be speaking with you. Each day, more and more people are making the connection, imagining themselves in the position of animals, and momentum is building. The ban on selling fur in this one state, in this one country, on this one continent means, of course, everything to a poor fox or mink that was unlucky enough to be born into the fur industry. And on a larger scale, it is indicative of a massive global change. California banned fur just last year. The European Union banned animal testing for cosmetic products in 2004. And in the last several years alone, vegan food products have undergone a meteoric rise in popularity. We now see unique legal personhood status for apes and dolphins, as social revolutions of all forms are happening around the world at breakneck pace, accelerated by the far-reaching effects of the internet. This has been achieved by activists like us. We're not alone, and when we are finished today, it continues. After 5,000 years of written human history, we are witnessing the emergence of a new era, where all conscious beings are given a stake in the moral community. And as philosophically abstract as this may be, all it really means is that people are finally beginning to consider the experiences of all others, including animals. Any activist can relate how difficult it is to inspire people to make this one simple change, but there's reason enough to be optimistic that change will continue. We are hardwired to imagine ourselves in the position of animals, and we are hardwired to sympathize with them. After all, we have been doing it since we were children. I'll give it back to you, Chelsea.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alex. That was wonderful. Glad we were able to still have an activist speak out. So before we close up this portion of For Free Friday, I did want to share a question that we had from Facebook, actually, and this is for Matthew. So people were asking about the ban that just went through with Nordstrom's and wondering when that's going to take effect and what that means for the Oregon ban in general.
Yeah, I believe HSUS was the primary party working with Nordstrom, and Nordstrom agreed to stop selling fur and all the other exotic animal skins by the end of 2021.
Great. And then if you want to share any contact information or anything like that for how people can get more involved, please do.
Yeah, so I have a bunch of links I can post in the chat. We've got a website, compassionatepdx.org. You can always email us at compassionateportland@gmail.com. We also have a Facebook, Instagram, and a newsletter. So there's lots of great ways to keep in touch.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So on behalf of myself, Chelsea Davis with Veggies Do It Better, Compassionate PDX, the other organizers, we want to thank everybody for tuning in today. I know that we've learned so much, and I, for one, am really excited to put all of this to good use and shut down fur farms. So we want to invite everybody, regardless of if you live in Oregon or not, to put those skills that we learned today to good use, to call Governor Brown, call Senator Jeff Merkley, urge them to shut down the mink farms in Oregon, as they are, clearly breeding grounds for COVID and other infectious diseases. And if you want to take that a step further, I know I spoke earlier about we supply templates and everything like that. We're actually putting together a virtual action hour with Animal Rights Collective Portland. It's going to be at 5 o'clock Pacific time today. So there's a separate event page for that, which we'll share in this event page shortly, and you can just click on that. It's going to be over Zoom. It's very organized. Diana did an amazing job getting us all organized for this one. So we're going to have 4 very specific actions and walk everybody through everything, whether it's a Twitter storm or an email campaign, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be a great time to just come together as a community, support one another, but also learn how we can be so effective by just taking, 1 hour out of our time. We can do so much for animals, and it's always good to be together in that. So let's see. And then I also wanted to invite everybody. So for those who aren't aware, Oregon or Portland has an Animal Rights Collective. So we have a Facebook group, which everyone is definitely invited to join. Again, even if you're not in the Portland area or Oregon area, we definitely recommend people join because, of COVID. Again, silver lining, we're able to do a lot of virtual events right now. And one of the main events that we do in Animal Rights Collective Portland is a community meeting on the first Wednesday of every month. So that means that our next meeting is coming up in about a week or 5 days on December 2nd at 6:30 Pacific time. It's a great time for people to get together, support one another, brainstorm, and we also do discussion topics. Last month was really great, and we talked about, how to navigate as vegans being in this non-vegan world, especially during the holidays, which seems to be even, tougher. It's the toughest time of year. So want to invite everybody to that. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to hop off of this Zoom, and we're going to start the special screening of The Farm in My Backyard, which is a documentary by We Animals, which shows the environmental effects of fur factory farming in a community up in Nova Scotia in Canada. So all you need to do is go over to the event page for Virtual Fur Free Friday Portland. In just probably 3 minutes, it'll be up. So if you don't see it, just keep refreshing your page until it pops up. And again, ask questions, comment, and that's it. So thank you again so much for attending Virtual Fur Free Friday. We look forward to continuing the fight together. So everybody have a great weekend, and we will see you soon.